Hello student, welcome to all. This is Dr. Vignesh Karmeka, lecturer in geography, Government Degree College for Women's, Begumpet, Hyderabad. And today, in the part 2 video of the classification of resources, we are going to discuss about the following major points. They are: 1. Classification of resources. 2. Resources availability. 3. Perspectives on resource exploitation. 4. Conservation and management of resources. And 5. Sustainability of resources. Now, we move with the 6.5 section, the classification of resources. Generally, resources are categorized into two commonly known groups, that are natural and the resources made from the human interventions, that is human resources. But on the basis of various characteristics, resources can be classified in several ways as the following. And first, we will look at the general category of the resources. On the basis of these resources are classified into the two major groups. They are: 1. Natural resources. 2. Human resources. Now, number 1, natural resources. Natural resources are the main material base of original development. Each and everything which is beyond human intervention is a natural resource. The deficit of a natural resource may not be compensated by any other resource. In most cases, natural resources represents specialization of a region. Number 2 is human resources. Man intervened, man modified, man maintained, man generated, and man controlled resources are called as human resources. Man has developed skills, technology, and ability to generate, develop, and use the resource by his mental ability. So it is said that human mind is the supreme resource for himself. These groups of resources, those natural resources and human resources, are further subdivided into different types according to different perspectives. Now, we will have a look into the further classification or the further subdivision of the resources into various categories. Based on the distribution, resources are classified into two types. They are: 1. Ubiquitous resources. 2. Localized resources. And let us discuss about each of these two resources. 1. Ubiquitous resources. The resources that found everywhere on the surface are known as ubiquitous resources. For example, air is available everywhere. Light is available everywhere. Almost water is also available everywhere on the surface of the earth. But the drinking or the human consumable water is very limited. All these are called as the ubiquitous resources. And the second is localized resources. The resources which are found only in certain parts of the world or limited parts of the world are known as localized resources. For example, to say coal, gold, copper, etc. It means most of the important mineral resources are localized resources available only in particular areas. So these are called as the localized resources. On the basis of origin, resources can be classified into two groups. On the basis of origin, resources are classified into two groups. They are: one, biotic resources; two, abiotic resources. Now let us discuss each of them. Biotic resources. All living beings comes in this resource type. Forests and their products, animals and their products, birds and their products, fish and other marine organisms and their products are very important examples of the biotic resources. These resources reproduce, regenerate themselves. Therefore, they are renewable resources. It means biotic resources are renewable resources. The interesting thing is that minerals such as coal and petroleum are sometimes included in this category because they were formed from fossil organic matter, though over long periods of time, but they are non-living because the coal, petroleum are formed due to the burying of these forests, vegetation under the earth. Okay, and these are but non-renewable. And the second is abiotic resources. These resources include all non-living elements of the environment or the nature. Land resources, water resources, air and mineral resources, example iron, copper, gold, silver, etc. are the abiotic resources. Mineral resources are exhaustible and non-renewable as they cannot be regenerated or reproduced or replenished. So all these minerals comes under the abiotic resource. That means all non-living things. The next classification on the basis of renewability or the exhaustibility, the resources can be categorized into two groups or two types. They are A, renewable resources, 2, non-renewable resources. And let us discuss about each of these two resources. First is the renewable resources. The resources which can be replenished, replaced, reproduced and lost for long time are called as renewable resources. Such as forests, fisheries can be replenished or reproduced relatively quickly. The highest rate at which a resource can be used sustainably is the sustainable yield. Some resources like sunlight, air, wind are called the perpetual resources because they are available continuously, though at a limited rate. Their quantity is not affected by human consumption. Many renewable resources can be depleted by human consumption, but may also be replenished, thus maintaining a flow. Some of these, like agricultural crops, take a short time for renewal. Others, like water, take a comparatively longer time, while still others, like forests, take even longer to be replenished. And another second category is a non-renewable resources. The resources which are once depleted by meeting the needs of human beings can be regenerated or reproduced either by nature or by human beings, comes under the non-renewable resources category. They are formed over very long geological periods. Minerals and fossils include in this type of category. Since their rate of formation is extremely since their rate of formation is extremely slow, they cannot be replenished once they are depleted. Out of these, the metallic minerals can be reused by recycling them, but coal and petroleum cannot be recycled because they exhaust once you use. So all these comes from the non-renewable resources category. On the basis of stage of development, the resources can be categorized into two groups. One is potential resources, and two is actual resources. One, potential resources. These types of resources are present in the nature but may be used in the future. For example, petroleum may exist in many parts of the India and also in Kuwait that have sedimentary rocks, but until the time it is actually drilled out, put in use, then it remains in potential. Potential resources are the ones of which we have insufficient knowledge or we do not have the technology to exploit them at present. But we can in the future based on the advancement of technology. And the second is actual resources. They are the resources that have been surveyed, their quantity and quality determined, and are being used in present times. For example, to say the petroleum and natural gas is actively being obtained from the Mumbai oil fields in India. It is presently under utilization. They are not potential, they are actual resources. The development of an actual resource, such as wood processing of wood after cutting the plant, depends upon the technology available and the cost involved in the processing. The part of the actual resource that can be developed profitably with the available technology is called as reserve resources. While the part that cannot be developed profitably due to the lack of technology is said to be a stock resource. Actual resources are those resources whose location and quantity are known, and we have the technology to exploit and consume them based on our requirements. Another method of classification of the resources on the basis of ownership. Resources can be classified into 4 groups. They are: 1. Individual resources, community-owned resources or community resources, national resources, and international resources. And let us discuss about each of these resources. Now, first, individual resources. Individual resources are owned privately by individuals. For example, agricultural land or farming land owned by the farmers. Urban people own flats, houses, and other property are the best examples of the individual resources. The next is community resources. These are the resources which are available to all the members of the community. For example, the village common land for grazing, oil, village ponds, public parks, both in village and towns, picnic spots, playgrounds are available to all people living in villages as well as in towns, or the community resources. The third is national resources. All the resources that belong to a country or a nation are known as national resources. All the minerals, water, forests, wildlife, and land within the political boundaries and oceanic area of limited or determined and monitored by a nation or a country or the national resources. If you take India, all the natural resources such as minerals, water, forests, and oceanic water within the political boundaries and oceanic area up to 12 nautical miles from the sea coast are included in this national resources. And fourth is the international resources. The resources which are monitored by certain international institutions comes under the international resources category. The oceanic resources outside 200 kilometers of the exclusive economic zone belong to open ocean, and no individual country can utilize these without the agreement of international institutions or international acts. And the next, on the basis of durability, resources may be classified into 2 categories. One are exhaustible resources. 2 is flow or inexhaustible resources. The first resources, those are not everlasting, destroyed forever after consumption by human beings. For example, coal, petroleum, uranium, etc. The next is the flow resources. The supply of resources remain unchanged even after the renewed use by the human beings for a long time, or the flow are inexhaustible resources. For example, river water, sea waves, sunshine, etc. comes under these flow resources. In general, resources are classified into two types: A, material resources, and B, non-material resources. Material resources are tangible substances such as petroleum, iron ore, copper, water, etc. Material or tangible resources are direct, that is, freely bestowed by the nature. Non-material resources are intangible substances like health condition, culture, ethics, freedom, environmental harmony, etc. comes under this non-material resource category. Non-material or intangible or invisible resources are cultivated by the human beings with the help of their increasing knowledge. The advancement in technology generated a new type of resources known to all as computer resource, very useful resource that redeem the work load of man or human beings. And for economists, the capital resource is another kind of resource which is a base, an inevitable for an economy to flourish. Now we will have a look into the resource availability. Resources are human-centered and dynamic. Their availability and scarcity in a society depend upon several factors, including A, cultural factors, that is taste, diet, B, the people's view of nature, that is as spirits of resources to be exploited. C, social change, such as the changing role of women besides the men. The D is the scarcity of natural resources, such as petroleum, natural gas, and other valuable minerals. The technology, the computer-based, and the other, and the of economic factors we discuss in economy very well, such as the price, market, demand and supply of the goods and services. Now, we move with the perspectives on resource exploitation. The resources are very useful for human beings to meet their requirements or wants or needs. there are various perspectives in the utilization, that is the exploitation of the resources. Now we are going to discuss about the four important approaches in the resources exploitation. Among them, A, exploitation approach. Resources serve as instruments for those who seeks to satisfy their requirements and preferences. A given resource is used as intensively as possible to provide the greatest satisfaction to the consumer. Little attention is given to the environmental damage. And the second is preservation approach. This approach suggests that the resources should not be used but set aside, preserved, and protected for the future consumption by our future generations. And another approach is the ecological approach. This explains that all the living organisms, including human beings, are closely interrelated with the environment and must therefore be managed as well. Embraces the concept of a multiple uses also. And the fourth one, that is D, the stewardship approach. This approach argues that human beings have a moral duty to protect species rather than destroy them in the biodiversity. They suggest that as custodians of species on the earth, the humans must manage resources carefully so they are not destroyed during the human consumption. Now another section we are going to discuss is 6.8, conservation and management of resources. The conservation is the act of protecting the natural resources of air for present generation and also for future generations. In other words, the management of human consumption of natural resources to provide the maximum benefit, the maximum utilization to the current generations while maintaining the enough capacity to meet the requirements of future generations also. Conservation involves both the protection and rational use of natural resources. As the world population is increasing at an alarming rate, the rate of natural resources consumption is also increasing very fast. As a nation or a country, as individual communities, we are blessed with an abundance of natural resources that provides the basis for our life. How we use natural resources affects our health and the health of our communities. Because everyone uses natural resources, we all have some part to play in protecting, preserving, and sharing these resources. Unfortunately, natural resources are not shared equally among them. Thus, this unjust distribution of resources leads to serious health problems for the human community. And we can talk about the conserving natural resources all the day long, but so as long as inequality continues, environmental health will be right only for the few who have wealth and power, and not the many we need these resources for daily survival. As the Indian great leader, the father of nations, Mahatma Gandhi, said that there is enough for everyone's needs, but not for everyone's greed. As these resources should be conserved to maintain ecological balance and save them for future generations, better living conditions. The proper management of a resource to prevent its destruction or exploitation is called as the conservation. All the essentials for our daily life requirements have been provided by nature. Due to the overpopulation and human negligence, we have started to overexploit our resources. If this continues the same, there will be no resource left for our future generations. The reasons to conserve the resources are as the following. 1. To support life by supporting ecological balance in natural environment. The next is to ensure that the future generation will be able to access the resources to preserve the biodiversity. And to make sure human race survives in a better way in the future. Besides above reasons, the resource depletion is another important reason to conserve and manage the resources. Resources, especially fossil fuels, are in danger of depletion due to many factors: overpopulation, overconsumption, and changing lifestyle of human beings. Overpopulation is the main factor that can impact resources very much. The depletion of resources can cause changes in human lifestyle, which will affect the GDP of the world. It would maintain that the highest country economy, the largest resource. Another impact of depletion is increasing in prices of the funds, which may lead to an increase in its transportation cost and methods. Not even the cost of resources, transportation will be the issue. The food also will be a big problem. For example, the deflation of oil may lead to a rise in oil prices. Hence, the cost of the food transportation will increase as well, and the cost of food will also increase. The extraction cost of resources will increase. That will reflect on transportation cost as well. When the energy resources are produced, it has to be delivered to the consumers, so the transportation of resources can be considered as a part of power generation. Conservation is the act of protecting natural resources of the earth for current and as well as the future generations, as we said in the previous. Now we move with the resource management. Management of natural resources refers to the plan of action related to the renewable and non-renewable resources. Natural resources like land, soil, water, plants, animals are affected by global warming, overpopulation, industrial expansion, and other related reasons. The following are the reasons why we need to manage our natural resources, also to preserve them. One is everything that we use today, such as food, clothes, house, vehicle, fuel, notebooks, furniture, cooking gas, uh, utensils, toys, roads, etc. all obtained from the resources, that is natural resources on the surface of the earth. The next is a significant portion of the energy which we use today is obtained from the non-renewable resources. This implies that once they are used up, they cannot be replenished. The most important source of renewable energy used extensively is the fossil fuels, which have been taken millions of years to be formed. And the third is managing the resources would not only ensure its rational use, but also put a limit to the degradation it is causing to the environment. For example, the usage of resources in different forms generates a lot of waste which is being disposed of into the water bodies. This in turn is polluting the rivers and lakes. Limiting the usage will also reduce the waste generation and pollution problems. And the last point that we are going to discuss as a part of the classification of resources is the 6.8, the sustainability of the resources. Sustainability of resources and development of a nation is interlinked with a fine thread of balance. Most of the time, sustainability is threatened by way of human actions and activities. The concept of sustainability requires generations at present to use variety of Earth's resources in such a way with appropriate, effective, and not wasteful techniques, and leaving these resources under such usable conditions that our coming generation might use these resources effectively, because resources are limited but resources use is feasible, well, almost infinite. Excellent and effective policy frames and their execution may make it possible for each national perspective. In reality, conservation of resources is quite essential for future generations, but it depends upon options and values of each generation. The sustainability most of the time makes a resource dynamic, fulfilling the needs of each generation. This will fulfill the need of the present generation by efficient, optimum and suitable use of resources to assure the gains of healthy environment of future generations and providing equally healthy environment for present generations. Dear students, And these are the books recommended for further reading, and these are the books that have been used to prepare this e-content of the present chapter, that is classification of resources. Dear students, in this session we have discussed about the classification of resources, their usability, availability, the approaches in the exploitation of the resources, conservation and management of resources, and the sustainability of resources. In the next session, we will discuss about another chapter in the Roman geography. Till then, stay safe, stay home. Thank you.